committed to climate and sustainability in this city that we meet at 3 o'clock on Friday. All right, let me turn this on. All right, I'd like to call to order the September 5th, 2025 meeting of the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee. Madam Clerk, would you kindly call the roll?
Councilmember Hoover.
Here.
Councilmember Burt.
Here.
Councilmember Lou.
Here.
All present.
Excellent. All right, well, once again, happy Friday. Do we have any public comment on matters within the scope of this committee but not currently agendized?
We do. Our first speaker is David C.
Oh, welcome. I'm going to step up to the mic there so folks.
Well, happy Friday afternoon, as you mentioned.
Sorry, Jamie, one moment. Let me get the time right for you.
I was moving fast enough.
Yes, my name is David Cole. Quick items. I'd like to invite all of you to Bike Palo Alto on October 5th, where we're showing nice fun ways to get around Palo Alto. That's a Sunday at Fair Meadow School from 1 to 3. And if any one of you would like to lead a route, I think that would be really a fun thing to have the community be able to engage in. The second item, which is related, is, and I've asked this for a few times now, is that I would like to have somebody from this committee or this committee, this whatever, speak to all departments in how to promote cycling as a way to reduce congestion and ease of travel to the city's main events. To the cook-off, art and wine festival, music, anything at Mitchell Park, any weekend at Mitchell Park is totally jammed. And that there might be incentives, you know, if it's the MSC thing, give out ice cream, though they give out ice cream to everybody, but. And the analogy is that we have green electricity, but we're not promoting it. But we are. So we have super green infrastructure for bikes and everything above and beyond any other community, but we don't promote it. And it is the most efficient, the least impactful way of transportation. And for the city to ignore this, it should be in every, what's Ed Chicata's little thing that goes out every week. It should be in every one of those on every event. And we're really missing an opportunity here if we don't step up to that easy 2 or 3 sentences to help bolster load shift in our community. So that's the request to this group here, and I'm hoping you can make it happen. It would be not just transportation, parks and recs, and any city thing that puts on an event. So that's my comment for this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry, what was the date of the Bike Palo Alto?
October 5th.
Thank you.
1 to 3 at Fair Meadow School.
Thank you.
3 different routes, 3 rest stops on each route, all less than 10 minutes. Easy.
Are you going to be making the frozen lemonade thing
Yes.
again with the bike?
Yes, we'll have bike blenders and they'll be out on the routes instead of just at the event site.
Thank you.
And incentive to ride the routes.
That concludes public comment on items not on the agenda.
Okay, excellent. All right, we'll move on to standing verbal reports, starting with staff. Director Eggleston.
Thanks, Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works. Really just one item, a new thing to announce today, which is new rebates that are going to cover electrification permit fees. So staff is planning to launch these new rebates that'll cover building permit fees for residential heat pump water heater and residential heat pump HVAC projects. As we've discussed, it's been an issue that most residents currently do not pull permits when replacing this equipment. And of course, our programs with the existing rebates do require that those be permitted projects, so that then those are kind of added costs that some others are not incurring. So we hope these permit rebates are going to help lower that cost barrier and spur more adoption. The rebates for the fees currently range from $328 for instant permits to $638 for standard permits. And the intent is to adopt them at that level and then adjust the rebate as those fees may be adjusted in the future. So we'll be adding these rebates to the city's rebate hub. We're timing that for when the current round of tech clean incentives ends. And we don't have a precise date for that, but it's expected to be soon, potentially as early as sometime this month. Those tech clean incentives that are in place, like extra rebate that can be obtained, range currently between $1,100 and $1,800 for heat pump water heaters, and between $1,000 and $1,500 for heat pump HVAC. So that's kind of the scale of the comparison. And just lastly, noting these new rebates are really responsive to a finance committee discussion and recommendation from, I think it was April 29th earlier this year, that had to do with subsidizing permit fees for residential electrification projects.
A question on that?
Sure.
So Brad, do we have an estimate on when we think the current rebates will run out?
The latest I had heard, it was likely sometime this month.
Okay.
The tech incentives you're referring to, right?
We want,
Is there any
Christina's
update?
here.
Yeah,
You have to come up to the mic if you could.
Good afternoon. So regarding the tech lien,
Introduce yourself.
Christine Tam, Senior Resource Planner and Utilities. So regarding your question, Councilmember Burns, regarding the tech lien incentives in this is the third round that the state has provided tech lien incentives. The round two, those incentives ran out in 5 weeks. So initially, we thought that the incentives will run up very quickly within like 6 to 8 weeks, but they will launch in July 15, so it's been almost 2 months and they're still going strong. Last we checked, there is still over 80% of funds available, but when they do run out, they go very quickly because of the way that the consultant process those rebate applications. So at this point, we are actually planning to launch those permit rebates on October 2nd, just so that we have some certainty on when those permit rebates will get launched. There's some coordination with the rebate hub vendor, which is Rock Rapids, to get all the software configurations in place. And if we wait until the tech lien incentives run out, it would be harder to launch those rebates right at the heels.
And the current incentives to qualify, is it the date you apply for it? Or is it the date that you have inspection, or what, when in that window when they run out, is somebody say, oh, I put in an application before that date, but I didn't get it because it was wrong. So I'm trying to understand, what is the cutoff trigger?
So in order to access the tech incentives, they have to work with a tech certified contractor. When they agree to sign the contract with the tech contractor, that's when they have the funds reserved.
Okay. And then, let's see, I had one other question, but it'll occur to me later. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything else from staff?
No, just that one.
Oh, I know my other question, but for you guys. So this is a rebate on the fees that will kick in. Do we have any penalties for not getting a permit when you're legally required to do so?
Good evening, Commissioners. George Hoyt, Chief Building Official, Planning and Development Services. In our fee schedule, we do have penalties for not obtaining a permit. That is not something that we proactively chase because we do not have the staff resources, but when we know it occurs, we do apply those penalties or fines.
So I tend to think the most effective use of those is not to chase them, but to make sure everybody knows that they're in violation and this is the potential penalty. And that I think could have a much more of an impact if we couple it with, you do it right, you get a rebate. If you don't do it right, you're subject to the following. And how do we communicate that? And whether it's utility inserts when we announce the rebates, just if we couple the rebate with also the negative consequence, whether we have the resources to enforce it is a whole nother story. I'm not interested in chasing it down. I just think it'll cause behavioral changes on a good percentage of the people who otherwise they just say, oh, if I don't know I'm violating an ordinance or a law, or maybe I suspect it, I'll go ahead and do it. But if I know I am, I won't do it. And I think that's part of our human behavior that could work to our advantage.
Fair statement. I'll work with the utilities department to align that type of communication.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Committee member comments and announcements. Do either of my colleagues have anything today? No? Well, I'll just keep it short, but I did want to mention that, for NCPA, that we do have the annual conference coming up, and also a commission meeting, September 24th to 26th, in Monterey, and there'll be an interesting agenda there, given all that's going on. It'll include a legislative and regulatory committee meeting, which is relevant to folks in this room. And we know that, we're watching, of course, closely the cap and trade reauthorization, which will affect the city. And it's happening real time right now in Sacramento as they get to their final decisions. As are they, doing the final negotiations around the Pathways Western Energy Markets. And so a couple of big things are going to be happening in Sacramento in the next, well, certainly before we meet again in October, so in the next week or two. And so that'll affect both NCPA and of course this city. I'll just leave it at that so that we can jump into our action items on a Friday afternoon. So with that, let's move to action item 1. Who will be presenting for staff on that one? Oh, Tim. Mr.
Yes.
Scott, welcome.
Tim Scott, Resource Planner in the Utilities Department. I'll be presenting on our local code amendments, aka our REACH codes. You can go ahead and go to the first slide. So the REACH codes we'll be going over today are our proposed local new amendments to the energy code that go beyond the state requirements. These codes are updated every 3 years in parallel with the state code update cycle. And the energy code addresses building energy use and much so cost effectiveness. We'll also be mentioning our plans for future green building code amendments to be adopted in October. And we'll talk more about why we're adopting these sections on different timelines in the next couple of slides. The next slide, please. So AB 130, which absorbed former language from AB 306, passed on June 30th earlier this year. The bill includes language that limits the ability of local jurisdictions to adopt new residential REACH codes starting on October 1st. For that reason, staff pushed up the proposed timeline for the residential REACH code adoption to September, going to council on September 8th to adopt prior to that AB 130 deadline. Our non-residential REACH codes will go to council for adoption on the traditional late October timeline, along with the proposed re-adoption of our currently effective REACH code amendments. Next slide, please. The proposals that we'll discuss today, air conditioning, time of replacement, and FlexPath will be brought to council for adoption on October 8th. These are the only new proposed amendments that impact residential projects and that had the necessary cost effectiveness studies and model ordinance materials needed to bring forward a finalized proposal before the October 1st AB 130 deadline. In October, staff will bring forward new non-residential green building code amendments alongside carrying forward previously adopted REACH code amendments. The last batch of anticipated REACH code proposals will include energy code amendments that do not have the required cost effectiveness studies completed or necessary materials available in order to adopt on an earlier timeline. This currently includes the gas water heater time of replacement and updates to the new construction source energy compliance margin requirements. We're projecting that these proposals will be complete in spring 2026, given our current understanding of the cost effectiveness study timelines. Excellent. And you can just go ahead to the next one after that. So our first proposal, AC to heat pump time of replacement, beginning in 2027, require air conditioner replacement projects to either implement additional efficiency measures such as attic insulation and air sealing, or install a heat pump at a time of replacement or upgrade of an AC unit. Note that this doesn't require the replacement of a gas furnace unit, but the heat pump is required to be sized to serve the primary heating source of the home. We're delaying the effective date to 2027 to allow additional time for Palo Alto HVAC programs to expand and improve, to ease implementation, and to gain additional learnings from our program implementation. Next slide, please. Another new energy code proposal is to implement a flex path that requires remodel projects over 1,000 square foot threshold to achieve 12 points by installing energy efficiency measures from a flexible list of energy related measures. And on the next slide, we can take a look at the full list of measure options and their point values. Next slide. So measure point values vary by building vintage and potential energy savings. Not every available measure is cost effective, but there are many different cost effective pathways to achieve the 12-point requirement. That 12-point target is designed to encourage a simple electrification option as a compliance pathway, as it corresponds to the points awarded for installing a heat pump water heater, and could also be met with a heat pump HVAC installation. It's important to note that the measures from this list that have already been installed in a home are eligible to score points toward the required score accordingly. Next slide, please. Here we can see the other jurisdictions that we know are currently considering similar AC to heat pump and flex path requirements. As you can see on the right, there are also a number of jurisdictions who already have implemented flex path requirements in the current code cycle. All of the other jurisdictions listed on the left are proposing AC to heat pump requirements going into effect by 2026. And it's important to note that we may see additional jurisdictions considering these amendments later in the year, relying on an AB 130 exemption potentially to adopt, as not all jurisdictions have pushed to adopt on the August-September timeline. Also, these lists may not be exhaustive, but represent our current understanding of other cities' plans. Next slide, please. So staff hosted 2 community feedback sessions in August, including building design professionals and community members. Important to note that staff shared all REACH code proposal ideas at these feedback meetings, not just the September energy code amendments that are summarized in today's presentation. The community provided valuable feedback on FlexPath, water heater time of replacement, water conservation measures, and other green building and energy code ideas. Staff is working on evaluating and implementing these community ideas where possible, and will continue to do so into upcoming REACH code adoption opportunities. Next slide, please. Staff also met with the Climate Action Sustainability Committee Working Group on September 3rd to discuss these REACH code proposals. One point of discussion was moving forward the ACD heat pump enforcement date to January 1st, 2026. As we reviewed on the earlier slide, staff also reviewed proposed effective dates for other jurisdictions, AC to heat pump requirements as a comparison point based on feedback from this working group meeting. And we also discussed the on-bill and long-term system-wide cost effectiveness of the measures included on the FlexPath measure list and the impact on their point values. There is also now an available backup slide covering FlexPath measure cost effectiveness if we needed for later discussion today. Next slide, please. So staff recommends that Climate Action and Sustainability Committee recommend council adoption of the energy code amendments that we've reviewed today. Because the council meeting will be taking place on September 8th, the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee recommendation would be shared verbally at the council meeting. Slide, please. If City Council were to approve the proposed local amendments to the Energy Code, staff would then submit the amendments to the California Energy Commission and the California Green Building Standards Commission for review and approval. This process typically takes around 2 months, and if approved, the FlexPath requirements would be effective January 1st, 2026, and the AC to heat pump requirements would be effective January 1st, 2027, as currently specified in the amendment. Slide. And here we just have some contact information, but that's it for the body of the presentation today. Can we open it up for discussion?
Yes, and our public comment. I just want to make a preliminary comment, which is first of all to thank staff for scrambling to do this. You did a heroic job last year with the one margin codes, and I pushed you on this when AB 130 went through, and so really do appreciate you bringing this today, bringing forward today, and dealing with the urgency ordinance and updating those slides even just since Wednesday. So thank you for that. I don't know that our printout got all the updated ones because a couple are missing, but
I can print out updated slides if you'd like after the meeting.
okay. Yeah, no, I think we're fine. I just wanted to note that if people were looking for that points slide and the cities slide, but thank you for including those. With that, why don't we see if folks have questions, so my colleagues have questions, just because there's a lot going on here, and then we can go to public comment. I will say that from attending the climate working group a couple of days ago, most of my questions have been answered. That was a really robust and valuable discussion we had. I do want to just comment preliminarily that, similar to what I wrote in the Cal Matters op-ed with San Jose Council Member David Cohen, I think AB 130 was very well intentioned to get housing built in the wake of the California wildfires. I commend that, but I do think it was misguided to really restrict the building codes in this way that eliminates the reach codes and sort of puts us through this fire drill. I think that you can build housing efficiently and sometimes faster without gas. So that's unfortunate, but here we are. So I appreciate what you've done. And with that, let me see if my colleagues have any questions. I don't know who wants to go first. Or George?
Right. Okay, I have a few then. First, the deadline for adoption, is that based upon the date at which the city adopts our new reach codes, or when the CEC and the CBSC complete their review?
So Madeline Salah, Deputy City Attorney, I can answer that question. The answer is we don't know. It's a new law, and we don't know how the CBSC is going to interpret its own mandate to reject amendments that don't comply with AB 130 beginning October 1st. They could interpret that to mean it must be submitted by October 1st, or they could interpret it passed by the city and submitted to them by October 1st, or they could interpret it to mean that they have to have had time to approve it before October 1st. We just don't know. With that said, we continue to believe that we have a strong argument to adopt these local amendments under a separate exemption that allows for reach codes that incentivize all electric construction while while permitting mixed fuel construction in alignment with city's adopted general plan.
Okay, well, it's good to hear that we think we have a fallback argument. Or have we or anybody else asked them what their interpretation is?
Yes,
And,
and
And-
they haven't taken a position publicly.
okay, and just no response. I would, if it's really pertinent, I mean, we're racing forward either way, but I think our state senator, who's been very involved with this whole range of legislation and chairs a key subcommittee or a committee, might be able to help us get an answer. So, and then on the AC to heat pump, we're looking at attic insulation or air sealing, or the heat pump. Is that right?
So it would be either replacing with another traditional AC and including both attic insulation and air sealing measures, or alternatively installing a heat pump.
Okay, so it's and.
Yes.
It's with an EG and a comma. So you might want to clarify really what we're requiring. And that's not something that we could establish like a point system on that would further incentivize the heat pump.
What do you mean by a point system?
Well, we use point systems for some of the other requirements, and I just don't know whether there's some way that we basically could frame the requirements so that we really like on some of the other incentives we've done, it makes it so it's an overwhelming choice for them to do what we really hope they'll do.
These requirements were established based on the cost effectiveness study for this measure. And the energy efficiency of the different perspectives over time. I personally believe the incentive is to move towards heat pump because it's going to be very costly to hire multiple contractors to go in and seal up ducts. You're going to have to tear into walls and that type of situation. It's very costly, as well as hiring another insulating company separate from your mechanical contractor to do so. So I think those are the incentives.
Good. That's good to hear. And then did I understand it correctly that the heat pump would have to cover the entire home? It is, and if so, is that the case? If they're replacing an AC system that doesn't cover the entire home, would they have to replace it with a heat pump that does cover the entire home? And does that create a disincentive to go to the heat pump?
So the requirement is that the heat pump would be sized in order to serve as the primary heating source for the home.
But my question is, what if it's replacing an AC that is not sized as the primary heat source for the entire home? So we're saying, if you do the thing that we want you to do, you have to do a bigger system than what you're replacing, and therefore they may not choose to go the path that we want.
So there is actually there's an exemption in the requirement for if this installation of a heat pump would require you to install a system that is, I believe, over 1 ton larger than the current existing system. So if it was,
And how many tons? It's I
think around 3 to 4 tons is standard.
Typical for a whole home.
Yeah.
So if it is a real big increase, then it would have that limit. It might be good to include that information because that was one of my concerns was looking at the choices that people will make. Are we really setting up the right set of options that gets the outcome we hope we'll have? I also noticed from the illustration that the heat pump looks to be a fraction of the size of the traditional AC unit. Is that correct? And if so, I'm glad to see this for.
I can't confirm if that's accurate, George. I don't know if you.
Is that a little Photoshop there?
I can't either, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if, we probably want to put a rendering that is illustrative of the reality. I was hoping that was the case. I go, oh, I didn't realize that. But we should probably be straight on that. And then on the community feedback, can you share, you listed that there were kind of, there's feedback in these different ways, but we don't know what that was. It said on the flex path, there was suggestion to add new measures or adjust point values, for instance. What were those other measures, or was it suggestion to say more measures and that wasn't discussed? So I don't know what really was considered. And then it says that's the feedback, but I don't see anything about what the staff response was to the feedback on any of these.
Yes, so we could definitely add more detail on the slide if that's helpful. Also, I can verbally say to some extent for example, the flex path, the measures, there was a discussion about whether we could use, I believe, home size and like smaller homes as like a measure that satisfied some number of points. And then there was a lot of general questions about point value and just whether it could be adjusted. And from our discussions internally after that meeting, it would require an additional cost effectiveness study to change these set of points that were assigned from this previous study. So it's something that staff doesn't necessarily have the resources to do on our own or particularly within this timeline.
Yeah.
And Councilmember Burr, I wanted to point out if you're looking at the presentation slide, so that just gave a very high level summary, but in the staff report itself, it actually does lay out what the responses were to some of that.
Okay, great. And the final bullet said that staff's considering for the future other options. And will we have the prerogative to do the other options under AB 130?
So I see Maddie already coming on video, but I think that alludes to what she mentioned earlier on the exemption related to our general plan, which we can't say 100% that it will be accepted, but we have that as an option available to try to continue making changes.
That's good to hear. And Maddie, could you just tell us a little bit more the basis for why we think we may qualify under that exemption?
Sure. So I can read you the exemption language, which is for changes or modifications that are necessary to implement a local code amendment that is adopted to align with the general plan approved on or before June 10th, 2025, and that permits mixed fuel residential construction consistent with federal law, while also, so that's a reference to the CRA versus Berkeley case, while also incentivizing all electric construction as part of an adopted greenhouse gas emissions reduction strategy. And our comp plan has very strong language in it about greenhouse gas emissions reductions and specifically building electrification, and it includes references to our SCAP. So local amendments that serve those goals we feel are right within the heartland of what that exemption is meant to allow.
Great, that's really encouraging to understand that. So thank you. I'm done.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that BP requirement is in the staff report pretty clearly that it's in addition, any additional demand for heat. So I think that's a good thing. All right, thank you. Councilmember Liu.
I'll hold it for the actual discussion round.
All right, and let's see what public comment we might have on this item, Madam Clerk.
We currently have 3 requests to speak. Our first speaker is David C.
Welcome back.
Thank you, David Cole, Carbon Free Palo Alto. in reading through the staff report, there's a list of exemptions. And there needs to be one other item there. I believe it's packet page 14 or staff report page 8 is where the exemptions start and then it ends on the next page. One other exemption should be added for those homes that have a combination heat pump that does hot water heating and home heating. Those cases, if they wanted to add AC, would be separate, and those cases don't already have AC, such that you would not want to have them go through the rigors of having an AC system that does heating because they already have it. And I can think of 2 examples where that exists today. It would be great to have that as an explicit listed exemption. I mean, there are outlined cases for where you can challenge and, apply for exemptions, but those are lengthy and busy but if it's already listed in the exemption, then they don't get caught up in the permitting department and where somebody says, oh, it's not there, sorry, guy, you gotta do this alternative. And so just be a single line, in the case of existing heat pump for heating and where heating already exists, they can add an AC unit without having to size that for heating home because it's already heated by heat pumps. Thanks.
Our next speaker is Peter B.
Good afternoon. I'm Peter Voltic. Palo Alto should allow electric resistance water heating for all ADUs, and this should be included in the local ordinance amendment we're discussing today. Electric resistance water heaters are either simple storage tanks with an electric heating coil. They are available in a variety of sizes and can easily be fit into cabinets, attics, and other unused spaces in a building. They are inexpensive, typically a few $100s, and easy to install. Or on-demand electric water heaters. They're extremely small, think the size of a shoebox. Extremely efficient as they heat water only when needed, usually close to the point of use. They're also inexpensive, typically under $500 and easy to install. Electric resistance water heaters are 100% efficient. All energy input is converted into water heat. Heat pump water heaters are effectively required for all new residential construction. They're large, complicated, and expensive, typically $2,500, and take up a 2-foot by 2-foot full height closet. They also generate cool air and noise. Heat pump water heaters are 300% efficient, transferring 3 times as much heat into the water as is used to drive the equipment. But this is only valid when they are transferring heat from an unconditioned space. When located within the heated building envelope, they're transferring heat away from conditioned air. ADUs are compact. Efficient use of space is paramount to create quality living environments. Saving 4 square feet in a 600 square foot structure is more significant than in a 3,000 square foot house. ADU construction budgets are typically tighter than that of large new homes, both in unit cost and overall expenditures. Again, saving $2,000 on water heating equipment is more significant on a $400,000 budget than a $2 million budget. In the past, electric resistance water heating was significantly restricted because energy used in generating electricity was carbon intensive and inefficient, coal or gas-fired generation. Palo Alto maintains its own electric utility and purchases all electricity from renewable and carbon-free sources. In Palo Alto, electric resistance water heating does not increase the city's carbon footprint. Some argue that the inherent efficiency of a heat pump water heater ought to be required for all forms of water heating. However, the added cost, complexity, and inconvenience, especially in smaller structures, outweighs the benefit for many homeowners, especially when electric generation is no longer a dirty and carbon-intensive process in Palo Alto. The California Energy Code currently allows electric resistance water heating for structures under 500 square feet. Palo Alto should adopt a local ordinance amendment allowing electric resistance water heating for all sizes of ADUs. I'll note that I presented this to the staff meeting, reaching out to design professionals on August 12th. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dashiell L. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Dashiell Leeds. I'm the Conservation Coordinator for the Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter. We enthusiastically support the staff recommendation for this committee to recommend that the City Council adopt the ordinance presented to you tonight, which includes the air conditioning to heat pump language. In moving forward, Palo Alto would be in line with other local climate leaders, such as Menlo Park, Sunnyvale, and Mountain View, who have all adopted AC to heat pump language. A great time to install an electric heat pump is when you're replacing your air conditioning system. Heat pumps are extremely efficient, generally 3 to 4 times more efficient than conventional heaters and air conditioning units. They can also operate in reverse, meaning that our heat pumps can heat and cool our home, so residents can avoid the use of their gas furnace, and if that gas furnace does die, it won't need to be replaced at all, since the heat pump is already fulfilling its role. This language would reduce emissions, improve indoor air quality, and future-proof Palo Alto for when the air quality management district rules phasing out the sale of gas appliances take effect. Thank you to city staff for preparing this code language in time to meet the October 1st deadline established by AB 130, and we encourage this committee to move swiftly to recommend its adoption by the City Council. Thank you for your time and consideration.
That concludes public comment on agenda item number 1.
All right, thank you very much. I guess I first want to ask if staff has any responsive comments or thoughts on either Mr. Cole's suggestion about adding to additional exceptions and or Peter's comments about electric resistance heaters. So if there's anything from any of the staff members.
Should be willing to cover it. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we should talk about both.
Okay. Will you want to speak to the exemption? Like systems.
So the exemption for the AC systems where someone already has a heat pump that is that already has a heat pump heating system wasn't on our radar, and I think that I don't know if we're prepared to write an exemption for that, but this is the kind of situation that I think we can learn about in the time from the time that this is adopted to the time it becomes effective in January 1st, 2027. And there may be other configurations in addition to this that may need exceptions. And I would anticipate, and I'll defer to Maddie if she if she has anything to say on this, but I would expect that we would be able to adopt those exceptions before this becomes effective under that exemption 5 that we have. Maddie, did you want to add anything there?
No, nothing to add. Nothing to add.
Okay. So then with respect to the electric resistance heating, there are some real challenges in the energy code. And George, if you want to jump in, please do. But there are some real challenges. It's not that they're prohibited in ADUs, but the fact that they use so much more energy, electric energy than the heat pumps makes it hard for them to pass energy code requirements, which aren't necessarily things that we have the power to exempt. However, all the points that the commenter was making are valid ones, and he's not the only commenter that we had in our outreach discussions talking about this as something important to look at. And so I think we want to take those comments and dig into these resistance heaters and see if there's anything that we can do to facilitate these one way or another. And typically the way you would get one of these to work is through adding a lot of solar. But we don't have a clear answer yet on what it would take to get them compliant with energy codes, or whether there's something that can be done at the state level.
And so he's seems to be advocating primarily for the resistance water heating in ADUs. Do you get many requests at the city for people who want that in larger structures?
No.
Okay, so really that is sort of the issue. Now, of course,
I want to amend that a little bit. I don't know how many requests you get, but we do hear comments from people periodically who have built their home with like a gas tankless water heater, for example, or who we even had two commenters at the outreach session who showed up and said, my house, I don't have room in my house to put, I need electric resistance. I don't have room for a heat pump water heater.
Mhm.
That is true. In some of the existing conditions, especially in older homes, the area is very small. Where they could put a heat pump water heater, and I think some people are concerned about the hot and cold air that it creates in that environment within their home. But I will also say that, yes, as the energy code does allow electric resistant water heaters in certain situations under the prescriptive measures. 95% of all projects are based off of the performance measures, and it is very difficult. And we also heard at the public meeting from energy raters that it was very difficult to achieve that. So I think it was Luke Morton that spoke to it regarding one of the public meetings that we had. And he suggested that, we really talk to the Energy Commission about this and see what kind of exemptions they can outline in the state code.
Interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I would just say that, we are in an interesting circumstance with respect to what we can do, knowing what we can do. When we were watching AB 130 as a budget trailer bill go through, and we saw the exemption relating to those that had specific language in their general plan, we're hopeful that would cover us, given the things that our city attorney described. But there is uncertainty around that. And so for the things that we have in past effectiveness studies and that we're ready to do, we would be joining, as per your slide, a lot of other jurisdictions who are moving with alacrity because there's more certainty around this, albeit with the uncertainty that Councilmember Burt raised, that we just can't only do so much about, which is to pass it here as fast as we can, send it to the state, hope the CEC approves it, and that we're good. So I think, this is a circumstance where we just do the best we can to meet the goals that we've set out. So I do really appreciate that. I also appreciate that this is an adjustment for our residents. I mean, when we went from coal to gas, and now when we go away from gas to electric for some, it is an adjustment. So I appreciate building in the flexibility to this and some of the exceptions. That's certainly important, and it sounds like during the feedback sessions, a lot of that concern has been addressed. So I'm excited that we're able to do this now. The flex path, I was fascinated to see all the different points for the different things, and that there's really a variety of ways people can achieve that 12 points. Sometimes it's just one thing. So that, and those, something I don't think's come out yet today, but we asked about the other day, is those points are not set by us, right? They're set by the state. So those are kind of preset point values, and we're just saying if you get to 12, you're good. And there's a variety of flexible ways to do that. So I think this is well thought through and smart, and I appreciate that it's also a bit of a learning curve, and that if we learn more, well, we will learn more, but investigate more and learn more by January, then we'll see what we can do under the other exception we hope we fall under, and just keep moving forward. So I'm supportive of the proposal, but we take it back to my colleagues. Councilmember Liu, would you like to speak now?
Yes, thank you. Just follow up on that thread around Mr. Balte's public comment. So in the ordinance, there are exemptions that align with like state exemptions for ADUs, or also like a director's exemption. I'm not quite sure how those would intersect here, or like what the practical realities of those exemptions would actually mean for something like an ADU that you might want a tankless water heater. Can you help clarify that?
Well, tankless water heater is operated with fuel gas.
Or right,
So
Yeah.
that's one option. The exceptions that are referred to in the ordinances in the state code are exemptions that are applicable through those two different mechanisms. So in our local ordinances, we can grant those exceptions on our local level. And we can apply the state exemptions to state regulations as they come in for the processing. Does that answer your question, Councilmember? Jordan?
oh,
Oh, there are two words, sorry,
Oh.
you can also mention the innovative measures, sort of.
Oh, of course, and there's also innovative measures, but I'm not sure that we would want to look at that innovative measures, an innovative measure to replace heat pump water heaters. Putting a gas tankless.
oh, yeah, definitely not. Okay, so to the extent that there are state level exemptions for, I guess, local objective standards for certain kinds of ADUs. What would that in practice mean for an ADU that needs to install a water heating solution?
Well, ADUs do still need, even though there's a lot of ADU regulations and exemptions regarding ADU laws and ordinances, they still have to comply with the energy standards.
Right, with the state standards,
The
but not our
state
standards.
standards, yes.
Okay. And that gets back to your earlier point about basically needing a heat pump in almost all cases anyways, with exceptions for things like rooftop solar or other measures. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to close the loop on that thread.
No problem.
I mean, I think everything makes sense here, and I'm happy to move forward with this. I mean, obviously, we don't have a lot of time or a lot of options, and it seems like most things are precluded to us. So I want to ask the sort of inverse question, like what other options are actually open to us that staff has considered or could consider, given the very short time we have until October?
Yeah, so there are a number of, especially, I mean, some of the things we alluded to from, for example, the community discussions. Some of the items that fell under that last bullet point, other feedback, like around adjustments to our EV readiness requirements, or updated electric load calculations, passive housing standards potentially, and gas stove time of replacement. Those are all things that we've considered and that we didn't have the materials that we like. If it was something we considered earlier in the process, we don't have the materials that we need, either cost effectiveness studies or model ordinances, et cetera, to pursue them on this timeline,
Right.
Or things that have come up more recently that due to the time constraints, we haven't been able to bring to this September adoption date.
Right.
So there are definitely other paths that we have in mind that.
Right. It seems like.
Can I
once
just add, though? A lot of this feedback, though, potentially falls under exemption 5 and could be adopted at a later date. So I think that's what we're relying on heavily for
Yes.
all the future options that we're looking for.
Yes. For the purpose of this meeting, I totally understand the time constraints, and I think it's good to review that list again, but what choices do we have? I guess there's a choice for the AC to heat pump could begin in 2026, like some other cities, or it could begin in 2027. Like that's a discrete number that we can just change. Is there anything else like that where there's like material flexibility?
Along a similar line, we could theoretically make changes to the flex path target scores if there was a reason to do so.
Oh, so the target score is not like from moving it from 12 to something
Right,
else
the
instead of
the
changing the
actual
point value.
point values of the measures are set by the cost effectiveness study, but what we choose is the target score of what we want these buildings to achieve.
Right.
As I said,
okay.
we had set it to try and meet that kind of minimum fuel substitution and electrification threshold. But that is something that could be adjusted if there was a need.
Understood. I'll have to think more about that. I'm not sure. I think 12 seemed like a good point value when I was looking at the or a good threshold when I was looking at the point values of different programs that really required substantial electrification. And for AC to heat pump, we're so close to 2026. I don't know what well, I'm at peace at 2027 with 2027 if that's what we roll with. So it's sad to be a year behind the other cities. Like plausibly, we could maybe be 6 months behind those other cities, but we're just so close to 2026. I'm not sure like January 1st, 2026 is timeline that could like disrupt ongoing purchasing decisions or things like that to a significant degree. So yeah, those are my comments. Happy to move things forward and would be happy to consider any other changes to the points or dates if those are the only things we can really consider right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just following up on George's last point, what would prevent us from moving that effective date on the AC conversion to July 1st of 2026 or something like that? Like, why did we pick the January 2027 if some other jurisdictions have an earlier date?
So the 2027 date was based around giving our rebate and then whole home full service programs time to sort of surface some of these issues, similar to what David, like the one that David Cole raised in his public comment. Those programs are not going to be up and running until early next year. The full service program, the rebate program is already running, so we'll get some information from that. There's also some permit streamlining effort going on around heat pumps, as I understand it. And so giving some time for that, not only to get put in place, but also again, through our programs for us to brush off the, work out any kinks in the program before, you're really requiring this for everybody. And I think 6 months probably doesn't give us as much time to see what's happening with the other jurisdictions who are adopting this in 2026 and maybe have fewer options around programs. This is the path that they can take, but we'll learn a lot from those jurisdictions, and it really does take a year for that stuff to start to materialize.
Those sound like good points because we don't want to have a public backlash because there was something that we missed that really is we would redo and is unreasonable, but we just didn't realize it. Okay, so I get that. The exemption for the hot water plus home heating system. What again is the reason that that couldn't be folded in here? Because does that require a cost effectiveness study?
I think it's a matter of maybe not knowing enough about the technologies that need exemptions to be prepared to write that requirement in the short time that we have before we're trying to get this adopted.
And then lastly, on the electric resistance heaters, George, if I understood what you said correctly, they'd be subject to the energy code. So why not allow it up to 1,000 square feet, subject to the energy code?
Not sure I'm quite following here.
Well, do we currently, if I understand Peter Balte's statement, we currently don't allow electric resistant water heaters.
It's not that we don't allow them. There's two different ways to comply with the California Energy Code. One is the prescriptive measure and one pathway, and one is the performance manager pathway. When you're replacing a piece of equipment, there are mandatory requirements for replacing like a water heater, gas water heater. You have to replace it with an efficient gas water heater or a heat pump water heater that meets those standards. There is an exemption that you could or replace it with an existing electric resistant water heater that exists in your home. Or I think there was an exemption in the code for an ADU up to 500 square feet if you're replacing that piece of equipment. But when you are building a new structure, like I had mentioned in my previous comment, was that 98% of applicants, almost 99%, all I've ever seen used is the performance measure. And when you apply electric resistant water heater into the energy calculation, you take such a large hit that it is very difficult to rebound from that.
Okay, so state has a defined exemption for an ADU up to 500 square feet. State has now mandated that we allow ADUs up to 1,000, but it sounds like the energy code hasn't moved that exemption up to the 1,000 that the we're being mandated to allow ADU sizes for.
I really have to go back and look at the technical language to see exactly how those two align.
Okay. And so we would actually need to have our own exemption up to 1,000 square feet, or we aren't even permitted to do that for the energy code?
I don't believe we're permitted to do that.
Right, I can clarify, I think, what's being asked here, but it might help to note that the city is permitted under certain circumstances to make local amendments to the statewide base codes only if they are more restrictive than the state codes. We're not allowed to make a local amendment that would result in a more permissive standard.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. So, well, if we can put it on the list, that is something that we would really like to explore. Because we do want to incentivize ADUs. They do have limited space and by nature, they're not going to have the same amount of water heating need as a full-size home. And so resistance heating may be a reasonable approach, especially with what is our carbon neutral mix, which is not 365 24/7, but it's still carbon neutrality, and the state's grid is getting greener all the time. So that may be a direction we want to go. All right, I think that covers all of my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. I share the interest in moving it, the AC to heat pump earlier, but I also hear the reasons that we want to do it well. And I think right now there's just a lot of concern and discussion around movements toward heat pumps generally that for the reasons that you all have discussed, I'm comfortable with this with the ordinance as proposed. So you are looking for a recommendation to council. So I would go ahead and move that this committee recommend the emergency ordinance provided in the staff report to amend to have the local amendments to the energy code. Is that specific enough to serve your purpose?
Do we want to put up the staff recommendation?
There, put up the staff recommendation. Oh, there it is. Got it pretty close.
We did.
Yes, that works.
Second.
Thank you. Any more discussion on this item? Councilmember Leo, I'm looking at you.
No.
No, okay. All right, well, when you're ready, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Councilmember Liu,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Vinker.
Yes,
Motion carries.
yay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move to item 2. I expect we have a staff report on this. Who's giving this? Thank you, Mr. Scott. Well done.
Good afternoon, council members. Jonathan Aubenshine, Assistant Director for Climate Action, and I'm here to talk to you about the upcoming air district regulations starting in 2027 around water heaters and discussions that are going on right now locally and regionally about how to assist people with complying. First slide, next slide, please. All right, so a little refresher on this. The Air District regulates water heating and space heating emissions through its rules 9-4 and 9-6, and it's required lower NOx requirements over the years to reduce regional air pollution and improve health. And there's a rule already adopted that requires that small water heaters, and by that I mean water heaters up to 75,000 BTU, which is about the size that is used in most residences and sometimes in parts of commercial buildings or in small commercial buildings, that if you want to buy or install a water heater that was manufactured after January 1st, 2027, then it must not emit any oxides of nitrogen. And what that means in practice is that I'm not aware of any gas water heaters that meet that requirement. So that means you're talking about electric resistance or heat pump water heaters, and we've heard about some of the challenges associated with complying with the energy code around electric resistance. So in practice, most people complying with this will end up using heat pump water heaters. They're also the most cost-effective approach on a life cycle basis, although they do have more significant upfront costs. And that's due to the one-time home modifications that you need to make, sometimes around space, but also around the need for additional electric conduit, also the need for condensate drainage and things along those lines. So various agencies are talking about what sorts of assistance might help in these situations. I think what we're anticipating, and I also just want to note that the Air District is also considering, there are a range of different projects that we see in our heat pump water heater programs. In some cases, installations can be pretty simple, but in a good third of cases, you get some very complex installations that can be quite costly. And a lot of times people don't move forward with those. People do, and they often cost more. And so the Air District is in the midst of considering a range of exemptions for projects that will have really significant challenges complying with these rules. So what we're anticipating over as we start getting into 2027, there will still be probably a lot of gas water heaters manufactured in 2026 that are still available for sale. But over time, that supply will start to constrict. And more people will need to put in heat pump water heaters to comply. There will be people who get exceptions, and I think we can also anticipate there will be people who won't comply and who will find gas water heaters from other locations or will install electric resistance without permits. So I think we can anticipate all of these different types of things happening. So I think there's a big interest in helping people comply and helping people pursue the heat pump water heater, the most efficient, most grid-friendly approach that's available. Next slide, please. Some of the types of assistance being discussed regionally include incentives, financing, contractor training, and streamlined permitting. And we've already done some permit streamlining. Certainly, if there are areas where we can align with what's going on regionally, we can look at that. I think we have a lot of good things to share with the region on that front. And then contractor training, there are a lot of contractor training programs happening regionally, but if there are efforts to start channeling people in a particular direction or consolidate those programs, that's also something that I think is fairly straightforward to participate in. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is incentives and financing. And these are sensitive discussions because they do require a lot of funding. And I think different agencies are at different levels of capability or interest in pursuing these approaches. And I think there are also robust discussions about whether, if you have a lot of times when people think about requirements, that there's a mandate, they often are thinking that you don't necessarily need incentives. And I just want to share that there have been some examples in the past that I've seen, even around new construction, where there have been both mandates and incentives applied at the same time. And so that's a tool that we could consider here. Just to give some, next slide, please. Just to give some put some ballpark numbers to what different incentive and financing packages might cost. And again, you're talking about much higher volumes of participation that you need to plan for once you have these mandates in place, as opposed to when you have a voluntary program like we do now. But even so, under some of the very preliminary analyses that staff did, we looked at 4 different scenarios, one with just 0% financing, and then another adding in low-income incentives, low-income and middle-income incentives, but with 5% financing rather than 0, and then low-income, middle-income incentives in 0% financing. And I have the assumptions behind this study, behind these analyses documented in a backup slide if we want to look at it. But the costs range from a little under $1 million per year for just financing only, up to $1.6 million per year for the most expansive program. And you can see the impacts on people's monthly bill. This assumes that the financing is put on the bill. These examples, just for simplicity of analysis. So what you're seeing in these net monthly bill impacts is the savings from the heat pump water heater offset by the financing payment on the bill. And so you can see when it's financing only, you're seeing about $7 a month additional cost to all income levels. With low income incentives, we modeled a $4,500 incentive. And so essentially the entire average incremental cost, the additional cost of a heat pump water heater over a gas water heater is being paid for there. And so the savings, those customers are experiencing all the savings of the heat pump water heater, but not the additional financing costs, while middle income and all others are experiencing the financing costs as well. In the third, with the 5% financing, we have smaller incentives for middle income customers. And so you see it balances out. The financing charges about match the savings for middle income. And then you can see how the monthly bill savings shake out in scenario 4 as well. There are a lot of different variations that we could consider, and I think it's very helpful to hear some feedback early on what sorts of different approaches have greater or less interest. Next slide, please. And actually, could we jump to slide 6, the working group feedback? Because I actually think it's relevant. And again, this is an added slide. So when we talked about this with the working group on Wednesday, first off, so some of the feedback we got, just a reminder that the health benefits are a really significant piece of this, and they represent an additional economic benefit for the region. So whatever cost effectiveness we're showing in these programs, the health benefits aren't counted there, and that is a really important thing to note. There was a lot of feedback about trying to coordinate our program with any air district exemptions under development, and we definitely intend to do that when those are publicized. There was some noting that costs may change as regulations go into effect, that the numbers that we're putting there, if gas water heater costs start to increase as availability becomes smaller and as heat pump water heater costs maybe start to come down as more people are working in the area and competing on price, that incremental cost may shift a little bit and make this program less expensive. And then there was a reminder that what I'm showing you in that chart is just first year savings, and that savings are projected to grow over time as increases in gas prices are forecasted to outpace increases in electric prices. And that's not guaranteed, but those are the forecasts that we've been seeing. But the most important thing is that there was some feedback on continuing incentives for everybody and providing some level of turnkey program assistance for the first couple of years to help people ease into this program. And that's something that we could price out as well if there's some interest from the committee in us doing that. Can we step back to slide 5, please? So the core questions we're asking you all here is, number one, do you want us pursuing these forms of assistance? And in particular, do you want us analyzing incentives and financing as an option? And do you want us looking at a wide range, or to just stick with what the region ends up doing? And I think we also had some questions about electric resistance water heaters, but I think we've heard in our previous items some feedback in that area. Our preference would be, or I think our recommended approach, what we would do, absent some significantly different feedback, is to continue discussions with the CCAs and the other Bay Area agencies that are looking at assistance programs. We'd add a work item into the 2026-2027 SCAP work plan to explore and bring alternatives for assistance programs to the council, aiming to do that in early 2026. And I think we should look at options that exceed what we hear other agencies are providing regionally, just to have them on the table, whether we end up deciding to do them or not. And I think, again, this reflects also as staff that we would recommend exploring the feasibility of electric resistance water heating and how that could be potentially facilitated, managed, just looking at the cost benefits of that as a compliance pathway. So that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Abenshine. Once again, really appreciate the work that went into this and convening the working group this week to have a really strong discussion of this as well. Let's go to public comment first this time.
We currently have 3 requests to speak. Our first speaker will be Dashel L. Dashel, you should get the.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Dasha Leeds, again, Conservation Coordinator for the Sierra Club Lumber Prieta chapter. We understand that this is a discussion item and that no official action is recommended of the committee today, but I'd just like to take the time to voice our support for the implementation of these rules by the Air District, though we know that, of course, this decision will be made outside of this body. We hope that Palo Alto can do everything in its power to support the implementation of these rules. The implementation is not guaranteed, and the support of local cities will be really important for the Air District to hear when it considers this implementation. Furthermore, we support the full staff suite, the numerous proposals outlined, including financial assistance and financing to assist residents with the compliance with these Air District rules. Let's do everything we can to prepare Palo Alto's residents for a future without gas appliances. Thanks for your time.
Our next speaker is David C.
Hello, David Cole with Carbon Free Palo Alto. And I'd like to suggest that the city look at other ways beside incentives. Incentives always tweak the market, and often they're just handed to the contractor. Such that if you really want to promote your item, I mean, people do go for that. But a case in point, I was helping a friend install heat pump water heater in Aptos. And I called up and found out the rebate program wasn't available. I called their 5-star listed installer, I said, what's the price? And he said, $8,600. But we understand, because the rebates aren't there from Bay Rent anymore, because they're going in and out. Or it was Clean Tech, that people are not doing this. So we're doing it now for $6,800. And so this was proof that the contractors bump up the price for the incentive that is given. And this happens over and over again. If we go back to the early days of solar hot water, of solar PV, it's always the case. So if you can get away from that and make sure the incentive goes to the right place, to the right person, instead of to the contractor, it's supposed to be incentivize, heat pump water heaters. It's not to incentivize the workforce or to encourage, contractors to jump into the game. They jump in the game because there's money, and then they game the system. So if you can work on financing or some other mechanism that is more cost effective than a make work program for the contractors, I would encourage staff to definitely look into that, because I can send you the text, it's in writing. That's exactly what this one contractor did, and it's not alone. When I was encouraging the contractor that I used to work for to do heat pump water heaters, he got into it because I was helping him do those things. We were at an energy exposition here in Palo Alto, and another contractor comes up to him and says, hey, you're not doing anybody a favor by going low price on your heat pump water heaters, which was essentially the same message. Don't go low, go high, take that rebate, run with it. So it happens all the time, and would encourage some way for staff to work around that. And I think you probably saw this with Synergy. That was good to jump into that program at that time because we needed to get going, but it wasn't a competitive price. Thanks.
Our next speaker is Stephen R.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Rosenblum. I'm a Palo Alto resident. I really commend the staff for coming up with these proposals to comply with the Air District's Rule 9496. These rules were pretty hard fought for. And as was mentioned, the health issues were really paramount in the discussion. The emissions of NOx of all these heaters in the Bay Area are larger than all the automobiles, all the transportation emissions combined. So that's not something to be ignored in terms of evaluating the costs of the switch. Second thing to keep in mind is that that the city wants to phase out its gas utility eventually, and there's going to need to be some process that was actually discussed at the last climate and sustainability meeting about how to do that. It's whether it's going to be street by street or area by area, how to encourage residents to give up their appliances. And I think this program dovetails nicely with that. If we can get people to proactively get rid of their gas appliances, it will help the city get rid of its gas infrastructure and the associated costs and health effects. And we know that not only is the NOx a problem, but there's also leakage of methane from these appliances. So that's another health issue. And finally, I wanted to bring up a third point about NOx emissions. I've been working with a statewide coalition to decarbonize low energy heat manufacturing and things like food preparation, pharmaceuticals, paper making. temperatures less than about 300 Celsius that are presently heated by methane. And we are encouraging the Air District to implement a Rule 9.7 in its current rulemaking, which would switch these processes over to heat pumps and heat storage. So I just wanted to also point out that this could be another way of encouraging the city to eliminate its gas utility in a cost-effective and timely manner. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Luke M.
Hi, Aaron. This is Luke Morton, and George. I appreciate the referral there. First, I'm commenting. I work locally as an energy consultant, and so I'm a bit of a subject matter expert on some of the questions that came up before and are sort of currently talked about. So let me add a little background, even though some of it may be a little moot. As it pertains to electric resistance heating or water heating, it's always possible to do it in any size of residence. If there's an opportunity for me to have more of a back and forth, I can clarify either directly or with staff in terms of how those exceptions are applied and understood in the energy code. But if I were to be asked the question, can I get an electric resistance tank to comply with the energy code? I say absolutely. Now the commentary previously by someone else who said it was effectively illegal is I can understand that vibe as the measures that you would need to take to get that electric resistant water heater may not be palatable to some. But I don't think if I were to describe them to you, they would be totally unreasonable. And essentially comes down to install a solar hot water system. We used to do it all the time. It's not hard. It just maybe looks more expensive. On the other side, the electric resistance tankless units, I do find as themselves challenging, not for energy code reasons, but for electrical code reasons to integrate into homes. And in particular, it's roughly equivalent to a level 2 EV charger for every gallon per minute that you size that electric tankless for. It is a non-trivial amount of amperage. And so the unit itself is small and looks very cheap, or is cheap when you get it at the store. But the implications for your electrical service and upstream costs for utility may be more difficult and more expensive. So it's not just the cost of the box. And so this is all part of this dance and balance of kind of fully realized costs for the whole system, efficiency trade-offs for operating costs, trade-offs for other infrastructure costs. Anyway, that's it. In case I'll still be on the line in case there's any rule that would allow me to have more of an interaction. Otherwise, I want to support the staff and George and any official or any commentary and feedback they have in terms of the code and the remit of the city on this.
That concludes public comment.
Mr. Robinson, you look like you have something to say.
You know, I just want to really drive home the amperage requirements on the resistance heating. An EV charger per gallon per minute was what he said, and a home requires 2, 3, 4 gallons per minute. So you're talking, you start to get up towards most of your electric panel being taken up by the electric tankless resistance heating when you start trying to size it up for a larger home. That's not necessarily how people would use it all the time, but it's not inconsiderate, and it's a lot of amperage. I remember hearing about a situation where there was flicker being caused on the system because someone had just sort of under the radar installed a few of these systems around their home, and it was causing the voltage to droop in the local area. So it does require a lot of consideration.
All right, well, thank you for that, and thank you to the public commenters. So, as vice chair of the Air District Board, I have a couple different lenses into this issue. And I just want to say that from the Air District lens, onto Palo Alto, I really appreciate what the city does. And I really appreciate, the city having led in this area, having shared its information with Air District staff, having an ongoing relationship and taking the time. I think it's to the mutual benefit. And, I think staff there respect that. It's valuable to them. It's valuable to the board. I brag about this city all the time. And, but I also feel like we have a city that is good at this. And we have the resources. We have a supportive set of residents on climate goals. And so we should go first, but we do. And we do it thoughtfully. We do it well. And it's proved very valuable. I want to thank Mr. Abendschein for adding this slide about the reactions from the working group and that shout out to health benefits. I went on quite a rant about those a couple of days ago. I won't repeat that, but that's the primary mission of the Air District is public health. And that is really where this came from. We delight in the co-benefit of climate benefits, but these rules are projected to prevent up to 85 premature deaths per year. They are predicted to avoid up to $890 million in health impacts per year. So that is real. I will leave it at that for today, but that is something that is important to all of us. I also wanted to mention on the slide, I think it was 4 that had the chart with the preliminary cost estimates. I believe, John, that was for the life of appliance, is that right? And I mean, I know it was an annual cost, but it was calculated over.
So, are you thinking about the term of the financing?
Yes.
Yeah, so the term of that financing, and this is actually a really important point, I should have raised it earlier, and thanks for calling it out, is that's a 20-year loan. And there is some justification for that in the sense that there are a lot of one-time changes that you have to make. And a lot of the cost that's being financed here, that incremental cost over a gas water heater, is that additional electric conduit, the condensate line, making space for the heat pump water heater. The next replacement is going to be much closer to the cost of a gas water heater replacement. So I think there's justification there, and it does lead to some pricing, some monthly bill impacts that may feel manageable. But I will say that when you start shortening that term significantly, then those monthly bill impacts do start to go up quite a bit. And so, we're gonna have to think about that carefully as we're designing potential options for council. So this may be more favorable than some of the options that we may end up bringing after we really hone in on the details and what can and can't be done.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to be, as you say, transparent about that. And a lot of it, there's a lot of, sort of a crystal ball aspect to this too. As we look to the future and we, as you mentioned, we think that, the savings will grow over time as gas prices go up. We also think the cost of appliances will change a lot, should go down due to technological innovation and market conditions. So, it's hard to know exactly, but we're doing the best we can here, and I do appreciate that. And finally, I just want to mention that as I think you mentioned, Mr. Abendschein, that as was anticipated at the time the Air District passed these rules, there are significant considerations going into whether or not to amend, how to amend, what to do. If there's interest, I can explain exactly where that process is and where there can be public input and the timing of it. But we're looking at it as the rules are now, and as we live into whatever it is that this committee and the council chooses to do to promote compliance with the rules, that there may end up there's more time for that, there's more flexibility in that. So it won't get harder. It might get a little easier, but I really appreciate staff bringing this topic here today. I'm gonna stop with that and see what my colleagues have to say on the specific recommendations, so I don't know who wants to go first.
Yeah, I'll go for some questions first. Can you confirm how low, middle, and all others or high income would be calculated?
So I think based on census data, we've seen about 15% of Palo Altans, about 15% of Palo Altans fall within, I think it's up to 400% of, it was essentially anybody who would be eligible for our rate assistance program, and that's about 15% of Palo Altans, based on census data. And then middle income is about the middle 50%. I need to bring up the model to get the exact number, but it's in that ballpark.
So that's middle 50% of Palo Alto incomes. So basically from not the bottom 15, but like from 15 to.
Yeah, it's almost certainly gonna be county.
Yes.
Okay, county. Good. Okay, good. Oh, so the low income is also calculated at a county level, or is that at Palo Alto
County
level?
level as well, I believe.
Okay. I'm trying to think how that squares up, given that we are generally more affluent than the county averages. And how that really affects the sizing and scoping of these programs. And the incentives are 4,500 was in the staff report.
Yes.
And our current level of incentives is, can you confirm that number?
3,500, but actually 100% paid for low income. So there's a separate incentive for low income that's 100% paid as opposed to $4,500. And that's another consideration here, is that a lot of times folks in the low income band don't have the upfront capital to make that $2,800 essentially copay that we're talking about here.
Right.
Yeah, anyway.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I'm trying to go through my technical questions and see whether I'm done there and whether I have anything else. Oh, do we have a cost curve, or have we seen the cost curve of heat pump water heaters over the last several years, or do we have any projections or sense of how that'll change?
So we've seen increases in part from supply chain disruptions and tariffs and increasing costs of labor in the area, but also we don't have the market volume, I think, to be able to see the sort of learning curve adjustments that you may start to see as you start getting higher volumes in the Bay Area. So I think it's pretty uncertain.
Okay. I mean, I could certainly see a use case for incentives, especially in the first couple of years, because there could be a demand shock and supply might not have caught up, or contractors might not have caught up. I would be more skeptical of incentives longer term, because I really would expect that some kind of cost curve will work to our favor. And I'm also sensitive to David Cole's point that when you give incentives to everyone, you are setting a floor price, and a lot of that value is economically captured by the contractors or manufacturers. And I mean, I think this is just sort of empirical truth in a variety of economic settings. There have been studies about the impact of these kinds of subsidies and how a substantial portion of the value does get captured by people who don't necessarily want to have that. Can you also talk a little bit more about streamlining and what's still on the table for us to do for streamlining?
So we've already done quite a bit of streamlining for heat pump water heaters, so I'm not sure there's much more to do there. I mean, there may be individual provisions or regulations that we where we find in particular situations, easing those might make a difference. I think really in around streamlining, we want to both share what we've already done, number one, throughout the region, but also where there's are maybe standardization efforts that are maybe slightly different from the way we do things, but would still meet our regulatory goals, that we'd want to adopt those.
Okay. Okay, so we don't quite know what streamlined permitting as a potential form of assistance would mean for us yet, but it will just be something we kind of keep in our.
Yeah, there are some regional efforts to try and standardize around
Yeah.
the region, so we'd want to track those in line.
Yeah, okay. And just to be extra explicit, this would only apply to the kind of heat pump water heaters that would affect single family homes, right? Or small duplexes or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's any water heater under 75,000 BTU, and that those can show up in small commercial buildings. They can show up in specific locations in large commercial buildings. They can show up in single family residences in multifamily buildings. There are buildings where people have their own individual water heaters.
Right.
So it's a range of places, but mostly single family homes.
Okay. Should I go on with comments or should I paper it off questions?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I am somewhat, well, I'm fairly skeptical of long-term subsidies that kind of go on multiple years in to really all groups except for maybe low income groups. I think we really just want to drive compliance and reduce the amount of unpermitted water heating work. I think we have a lot of levers already to incentivize or force like actually permitted work to go through a heat pump water heater route. And the scale of our subsidy of the program cost of the city is non-trivial. That's a non-trivial cost to potential ratepayers, but it's also, I think it's a little bit premature. I think we don't quite have the picture of what this looks like for multifamily homes, or at least for apartment buildings. And I would prefer to keep some sort of dry powder or some capability to work on those, to incentivize those electrification of those properties, which is going to be really hard and probably require bigger subsidies. So those are my early thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. So just briefly on the tankless electric water heaters, I was just checking in. I'd like to ask as a follow-up now to actually see the numbers in terms of the amperage required for whether it's a 1 GPM or whatever, because when I'm checking online, the number that was cited doesn't look correct. So I don't know what the correct numbers are, but no doubt it's significant, but I'm not at all sure it's in the close to what was referenced by the speaker. But I'm open to just getting the facts. And then this whole issue of potential forms of assistance. One of the questions I have is whether if the incentive was on a permitting fee waiver, does that tend to flow better to the resident than to the contractor? And through the chair, if I might ask if David Cole has any sense of if we provide the incentive or an incentive as a permitting fee waiver, would that be any more effective? David, if you want to join us for a moment, at the resident receiving the incentive rather than the contractor.
I find that very interesting too. So welcome back.
Thank you for this opportunity. Often the contractor pulls the permit, so the cost is all at the contractor side anyway, so if you allow him, the contractor, to have a freebie on the permitting, he's
He's just
gonna eat that up,
okay.
so I don't think so.
Right, thanks. And then the other program that we had, which is where we had a turnkey program. And in that circumstance, are we able to negotiate a pricing structure? And is that a better way to build in the incentives? And John, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think our experience is that working with a single contractor and trying to negotiate is challenging. And I think you really need some competition to make it work. So
what if we had multiple contractors and we had a pricing structure that they would have to meet in order to receive the incentives? But in my own mind, I'm saying, well, there's a lot of variations on the size of units. How would you really structure that?
So, I mean, I think I'm taking in this spirit, is there a way to, and I'm sorry, is this in the context of a full service program continuing? Or
It's really in any way, how would incentives flow to the resident rather than to the contractor?
Yeah.
Just trying to explore any option.
And I think working competition into that is a necessity at the end of the day. And we're trying to come up with ideas on how you how you combine incentives and competition, but we don't have anything ready to share publicly. I think when you put a standard incentive out there, there's definitely the risk of creating price increases out there. On the other hand, when you have incentives that are only going to certain sectors, you implicitly have a comparison, right? Because you're going to be able to see, that people who don't get incentives are getting price number one, and people who are getting incentives are getting a different price. And I think that it's a little bit different from the situation we have now, where everybody who receives an incentive, everybody who does this work ends up receiving an incentive. And so the entire market is distorted. If some people are receiving incentives and others aren't, you may have a different effect. So I don't know for sure that the way that things have happened to date is how it's going to work under a situation. I mean, even where if Palo Alto had incentives for all, but other regions don't, that's also market information that you can gather. You can see what people are charging in other places and what they're charging here, and try to adjust that, try to address that.
And I see David Cole was trying to indicate that he may have a suggestion as through the chair, if it's okay. Is that what you were? Yes. Okay.
Sure. Thank you again for this opportunity for input. When I was working installing heat pump water heaters in Silicon Valley Clean Energy district, actually, I think it was Mountain View, their program listed every contractor, the price every contractor had, and whether they did a electric panel upgrade or not. And so with this instant transparency, it gave a couple of advantages. One, perspective. People wanting to get heat pump water heater could go down this list. Now, it wasn't a vetting of contractors, but they could easily see who was the low person consistently on these things, given, not all parameters, but majority parameters. And then the contractors, if they pay attention to this, they can say, okay, well, I can see I'm priced right outside of this, and I'm never going to work in the city again, so I may have to lower my price if I want to, So the transparency, I think, is a really great thing. And I understand cities can't, are reluctant to have lists of approved contractors, and I understand why. But this transparency could go a long way towards making competition.
Thank you.
And good pricing.
But I think that's a really good point, John, as you were saying, really, the competition matters, but if we don't have transparency on pricing, then we really don't get much the benefit of the competition. And so a question I would have, and you don't necessarily have to answer it here, but kind of as a follow-up is, can we explore what Silicon Valley Clean Energy did and why they were able to list pricing? And is there some reason we can't do the same?
Yeah, we can look at that.
Great, okay. And then then we have this issue of how do we really keep people from just circumventing this and reinstalling gas hot water heaters themselves? And part of it, the streamlining and fee waiver are incentives, and we need to make sure everybody understands that. So if it's no longer a hassle and no longer an expense to go through the permitting, then the only difference is, are they still being incentivized to circumvent putting in an electric versus a gas system? If they're, the gas is just cheaper, and then even with the streamlining and a fee waiver, they could still do it. And that's where I go back to this issue of combining those incentives with penalties. And I don't want to lead with penalties. I don't want to be punitive. But if we are saying that we have requirements and we have widespread violation of it, I think we have to look at how we prohibit this widespread violation. And I think we'll get, just like when we're driving down the road and we have a flashing speed light that tells me I'm more than 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, I back off the accelerator. And I think most of us do that. So how do we build that sort of cognizance of most people, not all, say, I don't want to violate the law. And I don't want to violate it if somebody really might come down on me later. And I think we need to build that in. And not with the intent to have widespread enforcement, which we really don't have the resources to do, but to get predominant compliance, like most people do with most laws. They will self-enforce, especially if you give the right feedback loop. So I would really encourage that. Combined with, as you've already stated, the health benefits. I think that educational part, the environmental combined with the health benefits, combined with the long-term economic benefits, we hope that we're going to turn more and more people into making what are choices that we're hoping they'll do for the environment and are actually beneficial for themselves once they understand the full benefits to themselves. So that's the whole education and marketing part. And then lastly, on the economic incentives, I would really, as we have this mandate, so if we do these other elements, then I don't want to put the dollars with the low income. And I'm not sure that, I guess we really need to try to find out how much interest there is in the financing. We had seen before on some of this that there wasn't a great deal. And so if we didn't do the financing and only did the low income, that's about $270,000 a year, if I understand this table correct. And that's not so enormous, but where do those dollars come from? Are those from the electric?
This would be part of what we'd be working up in the proposals where the money comes from, but we listed in the staff report a few sources that we know we would be allowed to use. I'm not vouching that those are adequate or not adequate for the purpose, but the public benefits cap and trade funds are both.
But we can't build it in through our electric costs.
into our electric rates. That's a question that I think merits more
Okay.
more discussion, and it has legal dimensions, and I'm not sure
Right.
what, you know,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. That was a really interesting discussion of the how to provide incentives without them going to the contractors. I really appreciated that. It's it is tricky, but I was interested when you were pursuing the turnkey program, sort of the flat fee, full service type idea, and talked about the reasons it didn't really work that well for this purpose, but as more transparency has come about and we've seen some of these numbers and there's more contractors and we have more experience, do we have a sense enough of what they should be charging that we could do it in a way that kind of precludes them from taking advantage of the incentive at this point? Are we smart enough yet to be able to do that?
I think what we've learned is that doing this kind of work has a lot of uncertainty, and contractors, I think they live in a world that is not highly predictable from job to job to job to job. And they have a lot of different ways of managing their costs and to make the money that they need to make. And it is very hard to it's very hard to force contractors into a predictable pricing structure when they're living in that environment. They have a lot of different ways of making sure that they're recovering their costs. Now, I'm sure there is inflation in different scenarios. I think contractors are also facing rising costs for a lot of different reasons. So I'd say no. Coming up with a fixed pricing structure is probably not realistic. I think figuring out some form of competition, and I think the pricing transparency is an interesting potential idea. Lets those who can do it most efficiently, find their way to get the business, and that's what lowers costs eventually.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about that, the latter approach is that it's more nimble as market forces change and adaptive. I guess though that the benefit of the turnkey, you hope we can figure it out in a way. And honestly, if a little bit of the incentive went to the contractor and they were more available and predictable and comfortable for Palo Altans and it got more people to use them, I wouldn't have such a problem with that. But I do, agree, we don't want to just be falsely inflating the market. So it's a tricky one to sort out, as you say. Obviously agree with what I think Councilmember Lou said, and you've discussed about trying to do this in a way that reduces unpermitted work, right? And people doing that. Trying to balance the incentives for doing this, the carrot with the threat of the stick. As Pat was lifting up, I think is smart, but I was trying to find out, in terms of the violation of the rules, that would be something I honestly don't know, and I should know exactly what, and I don't know if you've looked to see what the air district has already in terms of fines or penalties for violations of this. Do you happen to know? I have known at one point, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know it off the top of my head. I think what I've heard or what I've understood is that that enforcement is likely to take place at point of sale.
Yeah.
It's not at point of installation. So, as we've seen, there's, when we're seeing permit volumes at 20% to 30% of what we would expect just based on a raw number of buildings and equipment lifetime calculation, it seems like there are a lot of opportunities to evade.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's a point of sale rule, so it does make that a challenge. In terms of the cost estimates incentive financing table, I think we talked about the low income being at, I think it was 80% of AMI, and the middle income again was what?
So, I think what I can say is that we're talking about in the modeling, that's behind those numbers, about 15% of Palo Altans were assumed to be low income and 45% middle income. So that likely brings you to a little over like 110, maybe 120% of AMI.
So we might want a little more workup on this because I'm actually somewhat inclined to include the middle income there. But I do like if we were to move away from incentives for the reasons we've been discussing, I do think it would be nice to stick with the 0% financing. That feels like a deal to people, right? So that kind of I think that's a good carrot, so to speak. So that's quite helpful. Yeah, so I guess what I would ask is what is helpful to you to get from us today? I mean, I certainly would like to see you continue the discussions with the CCAs, and other agencies. Definitely add a work item, the SCAP work plan. Yes, develop proposals for council consideration early next year. And I know we've had a lot of discussion already about further analysis on the electric resistance water heaters. What else would be helpful to you in terms of, it isn't necessarily an action, I mean, it's an action item, but we don't have.
It's not, but I think what I've heard so far seems to be general alignment that this path forward summarized in the slide is reasonable. And I've heard a range of feedback on the types of alternatives that this committee is interested in considering. And I think that we can create a set of proposals that will allow for a very full discussion to help the committee and then eventually the council come to a consensus, or not a consensus, but a decision on what direction to take.
Okay, that's terrific. And, I just want to point out, for the public that, there was, an interim report on these rules that went to the board, to talk about that analyzed market readiness, installation costs, infrastructure issues, and various other issues like affordability. And so that is what the feedback on that and the direction from the board is where the Air District staff is now considering proposing various amendments to the board. There's going to be actually a report that comes out in the next few months. It's going to go to the Stationary Source Committee of the board. I don't happen to sit on that committee, but there's going to be also definitely some public hearings. Let me see, I actually have them here. There'll be public workshops on these proposed changes this fall. So we also can get a sense here by hearing that feedback and what happens at that committee. And then out of that process will be proposed amendments that do come to the full board in early 2026, and there'll be an opportunity for public comment there. So we'll know, in less than a year, to what extent there might be some amendments, but I did want folks to know that there's a lot of interest in making this work. It's easier for us here in Palo Alto with our cheaper electricity. We're also kind of ahead of the curve on a lot of things, harder in some other communities around the Bay Area. So because of that, there may be some amendments that affect our community as well. So just wanted to report that out. Okay, anything further from anyone on this? Guess not. All right. Well, thank you all. Really, really appreciate this work. And of course, I'm fascinated by the discussion. So thank you. Okay. Director Eggleston, I guess, future meetings and agendas, where are we?
Yeah, let me bring up a couple of things for our next two meetings and the date change that has happened for one of them. So the next meeting is September 19th. Two items there. One is the one water plan. And associated discussion from the Utilities Advisory Commission. And then the other is reviewing and discussing design guidelines for our next iteration of the multifamily electric vehicle charging program. So that's September 19th. And then just wanted to make sure everyone's aware what had been scheduled as an October 3rd meeting has now been changed to October 17th, and that will be a 2 p.m. start, a little different from our usual 1:30 start. There, we're going to talk about the advanced rooftop HVAC pilot program and recommendations and design guidelines, as well as the preliminary results from the gas transition study. And you'll recall a few months ago, we talked about the scope of that study as it was about to get underway.
Great.
I have a question. I mentioned at a recent meeting an interest in us developing a kind of a matrix on all the friction points that we've encountered and how we have either dealt with them or are dealing with them or what remains to be dealt with. And I know that we are hearing about a number of these ways that we are deliberately wanting to identify them and then working through them. But I'd be very interested in looking at that more systematically on a spreadsheet so that we can really see, okay, here are the ones we've solved and here are the ones we haven't yet solved, and maybe the game plan or whatever. And just we have all these innovative programs, which inherently we are identifying friction points, and then we have to work through them. And I'm just interested in looking at that more comprehensively.
Friction points for the 80 by 30 goal or for what?
Well, really all of our programs. So as John mentioned, on some of these things that we want to look at delay till January 2027 on this implementation earlier, because we expect we're going to find some friction points. Yeah, but we've been encountering them very understandably on every program, and that's some of the highest value of what we're creating is not just saying, oh, here's a great program, but here are the bumps in the road, and here's how to overcome them, or where do we stand, or also understanding, geez, we don't know how to overcome these. We've solved this one, and this set remains a problem, and then maybe we can go into problem-solving mode, or we have to revise the program. But looking systematically at that whole, because we've got a ton of innovative programs, and by nature, we run into these, and I'm really, I really think that the part of our learning has been we expect that we're going to run into these bumps, and we don't know exactly which ones they are until we get the customer feedback, and then we work through it.
Yeah, no, that makes good sense. I just want to make sure I wasn't underhearing you as a specific narrower meaning.
Yeah,
Okay.
let us take that back and think about that. I think some of that falls right in line with what we've been describing, where a lot of these items we're bringing to you are the next iteration of a program where we had a pilot program. We learned from that, we identified issues and made improvements. So,
and really,
as we look at the next stage of the SCAP work plan, I know we've gone through the two pieces of it, but that goes to council? Yes, no, work plan?
The work plan for the next 2 years?
Yeah.
Yes, it's expected to council in December.
That seems kind of a logical place to kind of step back and maybe look at some of these broader questions that Pat is raising.
And a lot of the highest value of what we do is, though, not only developing innovative programs that benefit us, but others can then replicate or at least use as a base. But then part of that is really not having everybody go through the same learning curve that we do.
Right,
Conversely, we want to do the same thing from our CCAs, for instance,
Yes.
and maybe we should also ask them for their matrix so that we can just be looking at this more systematically, because we got a lot going on. And the programs are kind of discrete versus looking at this as practice. And maybe we'll also see certain patterns by doing it that way that would inform us on the next program. And I think I maybe more than a maybe, I've been hearing this feedback from John and others that we are seeing patterns to some extent. And that's a really valuable learning curve, not only for us, but for everybody else.
yes. And so I think of Palo Alto sometimes as a laboratory. Unfortunately, I said that to someone that called us a petri dish. So no, we will not be calling ourselves a petri dish, but yes, I like looking at the bigger picture and being a lab and all of that great stuff. So terrific. Anything else? No. All right. Well, thank you all. We are adjourned. Enjoy your weekend.